And if you're in
August
San Diego,
23rd.
stay
Los
tuned for
Angeles,
updates. I'll be
Lyric
there on the
Hyperion.
28th, but there's no
Buy
link up yet.
tickets at adamfriedland.biz.
I need to make
Tickets
a
are
website.
$15 online, $8 at the door.
I'll be in Rochester August 3rd. Buy tickets to that. And Boston 17th. Oakland, the first show already sold out. We added a second. Buy those tickets. I'll add a third, baby. I'll do as many as you motherfuckers want.
Come.town is where I'm selling shirts. Soon to be the place, eventually, where you can buy tickets to our live shows. I'm going to have that.
Nice.
I'm going to integrate that Cometown.events.
And we got a little meeting. We're working on something. We're trying to come to the U.S., so stay tuned for all three boys.
A lot of
are
people
going to
don't
start
know,
coming.
but we're actually all expats. And this show is recorded.
On St. James Island.
Yeah, on Little St.
Little
James.
St.
On
James.
Big St. James.
Big St.
Island.
James.
St.
We only
James.
fuck big fat
Big
bitches.
fat whores.
Now, how
fat
much
titties.
weirder would that be? Is if there was a guy with a private island where he had a bunch of just BBW sex slaves.
That would be. I mean, until they became slaves, that sounds like an awesome place.
I'm just hearing steel drum in my mind right
yeah,
now.
dude, I'm trying to go to Big St. James,
To
honestly.
the guy named Jeffrey Jackson, he's like, "It's my island. It ain't none of your damn business. Goddamn hands off my motherfucking island." Just big bitch island.
Jackson.
Yeah, and then it's like all the buildings look like that weird Egyptian temple.
Yeah.
Except there's one that's just a regular house, and they're like, "What the fuck is this? What is this weird regular looking house?"
Just one McMansion.
Yeah.
No, it's just like
Look,
a house.
They ain't no weird hotep worship going on. With just fucking big bitches here, bringing some of the top players from around the world. We got George Clinton. We got George Clinton flying in on a private flight.
People Bryce.
Just half of British P-Funk has
Hell yeah.
visited Big St. James Island. Manny Fresh, Chris Tucker.
Manny Fresh. The big timers are
Big
definitely
timers
over
are
at Big St.
reunited,
James
yeah.
Island.
Baby and Manny Fresh.
All of Cash Money Records.
Silk the Shocker.
Silk definitely there, dude.
C Murder,
Clips.
who's I think in jail still.
Clips, and Birdman
Mm-hmm.
hanging out at Big St. James Island.
Yep.
Like literally just a room full of guys just rubbing
Free
their-
Max B and send him to Big St. James Island.
Max B needs to get out.
Let him be on house arrest at Big St. James Island.
That's an official Cometown stance.
Yeah,
He got a raw deal,
yeah,
and he invented the term wavy.
yeah. It's like people are trying to figure out what Jeffrey Jackson's business actually is, and he's like, we selling clothes, but they also sell phone accessories. Like it doesn't make any sense. No, what you have to understand is it's a multi-level marketing operation.
I love Big St. James Island.
Oh man, I want to go.
That would be great.
All the players, all the best
We're
players.
inviting some of the top players from around the world.
Some of the top players. Oh god, that's Valhalla. That's the paradise.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Also, shouts out to the new stand. Have you guys been to where?
Oh, yeah,
since
new
it's
stand.
No.
it's fucking awesome.
I hear it's
Brother
great. I
Jimmy's
saw the
location.
marquee. It looks amazing.
I'll be there
Marquis,
tonight.
Nick will be there tonight. You guys will not have a chance to see him because we're recording and
This
it's
comes out
coming
Sunday.
later. But I'll be there every Tuesday. Just check out the club in general, though. It fucking rules. Bye, guys.
This week in Retronauts, we build an entire city virtually or something like that. Hi everyone, welcome to Retronauts. I'm your zombie host, Jeremy Parrish, senior zombie of expanded zombiness at 1UP. With me here we have...
Sean Malloy, the senior executive editor of PC Games at the 1UP Network. Ryan Scott, managing editor for GFW.
And Garnet Lee, senior editor of previews for the 1UP Empire.
And we're here today to talk about the Sim games, specifically SimCity and, I suppose, The Sims. Unfortunately, I'm suffering from day 2 of Japan jet lag, so like I said, I'm a zombie. I'm just going to sit here and kind of drool and try not to get it on the microphone and let everyone else talk, because this isn't really my forte anyway.
No.
So thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks for saving my butt and making this podcast worth listening to, I hope.
We'll see about that.
Okay.
You must have played those games.
No, I've played them. It's just they're not really my type of games. I'm more of an objective gamer, and having a balanced city, a self-sustaining ecosystem doesn't really float my boat that much. I need a boss to kill or something. I need some level ups. So I've played SimCity, I've played The Sims, but they kind of slide off my brain like Teflon, and my brain is really Teflon right now. So yeah, I'm just kind of here to provide a nice monotone narrative for everyone.
We're doing a fine job at that.
Without further ado, let's do a little of the usual pre-topic banter.
Okay.
Any of you paid attention to Virtual Console lately?
No.
That's good,
been a
because
while.
there's nothing worth paying attention to. The past 2 weeks have been pretty sad. We had the import week like 2 weeks ago, and then last week was crappy games. This week is crappy games. Kind of sad.
Did Nintendo, are they going to put Super Smash Brothers 64?
They might. Everyone kind of expected that to happen before
That's pretty
Brawl
dumb.
came out, but I think that's probably one of those things that they'll probably do further down the line once they're out of pretty much every other game. Although at the rate they're going, it'll take a long time for them to run out of stuff, because they've really slowed down a lot.
What did they put up this week that was so crappy?
This week was
Crappy culprits. Today's crappy culprits.
This week was actually the crappiest Square game ever, King's Knight. Did you guys ever play King's Knight? I'm sure Ryan has,
Yeah.
being the NES fiend that he is. Yeah, that's one of those games that Square released before anyone knew who Square was.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a legacy of their pre-Final Fantasy days, when they were the disc operating group, releasing games that were as dog-like as their name.
It's one of the games that put them in the situation of it actually being potentially the Final Fantasy, the original one.
That's exactly right. This is
3D World Runner.
3D World Runner was okay. It was no Space Harrier,
Yeah, I don't
but
know about that.
it was a decent substitute. But King's Knight, and Rad Racer was good too. I liked Rad Racer, but King's Knight was not so good. It's well, my personal history with it is that I hadn't even heard of it until like after I played Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, and was like, man, Square is awesome. They can make anything good. I love Square. Oh wow, they released some games I'd never heard of. I should go find these at a flea market and buy them. And I did. And boy, was that an eye-opening experience. King's Knight is a top-down shooter kind of. With a medieval theme. You play like one of 4 different characters: a knight, a dragon, a wizard, and I don't remember what else. Anyway, it's really slow. It has all these little hidden areas that are impossible to know they're present until you accidentally stumble on them. It's one of those really janky early NES games that just isn't fun. And you get to buy it now for $5 on Virtual Console. And also this week was Powerball, which is like a cross between football and rugby in the future.
Cool.
Very exciting.
In the future, they will play very cool sports like Powerball.
Right. With robots. They will all be robots.
I saw rollerball.
Yeah.
Yeah, see?
It's pretty awesome.
The future is now.
Unfortunately, it's not Powerball.
Just Powerball.
Kind of the off-brand version. And let's see, there's been nothing on Xbox Live Arcade in terms of classics lately, and nothing on PlayStation Network, although Japan's been rolling in the awesome retro games for PS1. Last week they got Metal Gear Solid. Isn't that awesome? We didn't get Metal Gear Solid.
That is awesome.
It is awesome, yeah.
Yeah, they have like 100, I think about 150 games now, PS1 games on PSN. We have like a tenth of that.
How do you fight
criminal.
Psycho Mantis?
That's a good question.
That's the first thing that popped in my head.
Yeah, I wonder how you manage. He probably can't do the memory card trick either.
Yeah.
Although no, actually,
Maybe
you can use the virtual PS1 card. So I guess he can be like, "Oh, you like Suikoden?" But I don't know how you do the controller 2 and controller 2's port, because there's no ports on PS3.
Whoa.
Wow, my mind is
do
blown.
it the hard way. I can't stand that.
Is there some kind of like sync option on the controls?
I guess if you controller, you could just
Yeah, you press the little PlayStation button and the number 2 lights up.
That's how it would work then.
Well, that's boring.
Well,
it just works like it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Damn it.
It's
So I
much
wonder
less
if you
fun
only
that
have
way.
one controller, can you actually switch your controller if you only have one to being number 2?
I don't think you can.
That could be a problem.
Yeah, I think that's one of those cases where Sony's like, yes, you will buy a second 6-axis.
Well, you wanted a DualShock 3 anyway, so there you go. There's your excuse to buy one.
Right. Except right now it's what, like $60 if you import it? That's a little much for a controller that does what last gen's controllers did.
It's still going to be $50 when it comes out.
I know. Frickin' Sony.
Unless you pre-ordered Amazon. Did they still have that deal on? Does anyone know? They actually Amazon had a deal where it's like $5 off if you pre-ordered the DualShock 3. It was a good deal.
Fantastic.
$5 is $5.
Dude.
You could buy a Dragon Knight or whatever.
Absolutely.
King's Knight.
Oh, that's it.
Or you could
Sorry.
not and have $5 to use on something more valuable.
Maybe Dragon Knight
like
instead of King's
a
Knight.
hamburger. I don't know. I'll get more pleasure out of a hamburger than King's Knight.
You know what game Nintendo needs Virtual Console?
Lots of them, but go ahead. Regale
Well, in
us.
particular,
Yes.
they need to release Earthbound Zero.
Yeah, I think we go over this every episode, actually.
Well, here we go
But
again.
go ahead. Why should they release Earthbound Zero on Virtual Console?
Earthbound's freaking awesome.
But what about Earthbound Zero?
Because it's never been released
Have
yet.
you played Earthbound Zero?
Not fully.
It's really grindy.
I mean, it's very like Dragon Warrior.
Yeah,
sort of like you
it's
get
a more
attacked
primitive
every
version of Earthbound.
2
And
seconds.
Are any of the Earthbound games on Virtual Console right now? I think it's perfect time with Brawl out. People are wondering about this Ness
Yeah,
fellow.
yeah, exactly.
who is this Lucas?
Yes.
Who is Ness?
Why are they shooting PK fire?
EGM had some insane rumor in one of their recent Quarterman columns that there was going to be an Earthbound compilation for the DS. I think they just made that up.
I don't want to say anything for fear of compromising internal security at Ziff Davis, but I have my doubts about that one. I think that might be one of those that came to someone in a dream. He woke up and said, "Yes, this is what Nintendo will do. I had a vision."
Quarterman on a vision quest. That's
Right, exactly. He had enough peyote, and all of a sudden, there it was, Earthbound compilation in the sky over the mesa, hovering.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, well, Smash Brothers Brawl out, Earthbound's been on my mind lately.
Gotcha. Well, you should definitely play it, but you're probably not going to play it on Virtual Console. You'll just have to dig up your Super NES card and hope the battery still works.
I find those kind of role-playing games just do not hold up for me.
Earthbound, actually, I didn't really like that much when it first came out, but I went back and played it about 2 years ago when Mother 3 came out in Japan, and I found that it actually held up better than most RPGs because it has a lot of little design concepts that were very forward-thinking at the time and make the game much friendlier. Like, when you're wandering around, you get into random battles, kind of, but before you get into a fight, you see little enemy icons on the field, and they'll come up to you, and that's when the battle. And if you're strong enough, then the enemy icons will actually run away from you. So when you go back to an area and backtrack, you don't get into constant battles with puny little enemies because they're terrified of you and they run away. So there's a lot of little design features like that make things a lot more playable. Also, when you take a fatal blow from enemies, your hit points don't all vanish from your counter at once. You have like a ticker that runs down. So if someone hits you for more hit points than you have, your hit points start running down, but it's not instant. So someone can toss a healing item at you or if you end the battle before your tickers run down, then you'll survive the battle.
Okay.
So there's lots of just like really cool little ideas like that. We should have an Earthbound podcast at some point. But
I thought you were having one now.
SimCity, who cares about that?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that that Earthbound holds up surprisingly well. The writing is pretty clever too. The story is unconventional. It's a good game. I think it deserves another chance. But
not to turn this into another RPG podcast, but when I picked up the GBA Phantasy Star collection, I was so psyched because Phantasy Star 2 was like one of the greatest games ever made as far as I was concerned. But that was 15 years ago or whatever. And I was like, oh, I can't play this anymore.
Yeah, Phantasy Star 2 came out for Virtual Console a few weeks ago, and everyone I think discovered that this game is very, very grindy, very primitive, and very difficult. Phantasy Star 4 is supposed to be much better, but I haven't played it personally.
It was very grindy, but it was a good.
I like 4 a lot.
Well, it was a good, innovative RPG in its time. Great story, but it has a lot of
is the key phrase.
Right. There are some RPGs that hold up to time and some that don't, and I think Phantasy Star 2 hasn't so well as Earthbound. But anyway, enough about RPGs. Let's talk about SimCity.
Which is kind of an RPG for cities.
I don't know. There's no random battles. There's no magic.
There are random battles in some of the later ones when they had the disasters.
Godzilla can come trash your city. That's kind of a random.
And the aliens would land.
Even the first one had those, though.
Okay, so Bowser is like a random boss on the Super NES.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
I see.
So the Super NES one.
That was
like
the best version of SimCity.
Well, let's start at the beginning as we are wont to do with the
okay.
Well, I think so just to clarify the RPG point so that someone doesn't think I was just being flip. I think that the appeal
you were, but you were.
No, actually, I was not just being flip. Although, I mean, there was
some substance to your flippancy.
There was some flippancy.
There was some substance to flippancy because I think the appeal shares some ties to the appeal of an RPG. When you think about your RPG, you get connected to your character, and you're very much in some RPGs driven by improving your character's stats, their abilities, their like things like their spells that they can do, their armor that they can wear, all these things. And then you're seeing that translated into the game world. And SimCity has thrived on the same thing. You connect with your city. You're very into improving it, and as it grows, getting new buildings and new vehicles and all the things that are going on around the town. And that in the same way, it's growing and developing, much like a character in an RPG does.
See, I think that might be a little bit too much of a. I really want you could make that comparison for anything you want. But I can't
always make that for Ace Combat.
But you have characters; they're flying in airplanes. You feel a connection to them. They get better planes.
Well, SimCity is a very long-term growth of this thing that you.
I've always seen SimCity as more like a combat-free RTS. Like it has tactical elements. You're managing things on many different fronts, balancing needs, balancing resources, figuring out what needs to be allocated where. Like to me, that is a better analogy. You have that kind of like that really broad, multi-front task ahead of you, where you're constantly strategizing, which I think makes sense given that the game actually was born from Raid on Bungling Bay, which was kind of an early strategy game, like a pre-Dune 2 type RTS. And the story there is that in designing Raid on Bungling Bay for, what was it, Commodore 64 or something like that? Apple II, maybe?
Apple II, maybe.
Yeah. Will Wright discovered that actually building the cities and building the levels was quite a bit more fun than the actual combat of the game. And
but you see, I think I have to be contrarian here because that to me is why it's not like a strategy game. It's like he was trying to build a strategy game, and the strategy elements weren't delivering what he wanted them to.
What he didn't.
So he lifted out this entirely other part.
Right. The other part, though, was the underlying infrastructure that made the game work.
Right.
As you battled through Bungling Bay, the enemies were constantly getting smarter. They were reacting to what you did, and they would build up this social infrastructure and like different bases, and their weapons would become more powerful. You had to kind of manage what they were doing by bombing their bases, bombing their electrical generators and things like that, or else they would eventually overwhelm you. And SimCity actually grew out of that aspect of it, where he said, "This is really cool. This underlying system here. If we could put players in control of this instead of making them destroy it."
Well, then he took away the.
Well, he took away the combat, the destructive layer, but there's still strategy heavily involved in the game. I would say basically, like if you want to look at SimCity as an RTS, it would be an RTS without person-to-person conflict, without military elements, without destruction. It's an RTS about creating, and there is some conflict with natural disasters.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you
that.
define RTS as real time, which SimCity is, and strategy, which SimCity is, then yep, certainly fits that bill.
But I don't think it fits the. I still disagree. I don't think it fits the mold of what we talk about as real-time
Well, it
strategy.
doesn't really fit the mold of anything, and that's what made it so unique and so great. Was that it was something completely different from any other game. It was again at Raid on Bungling Bay minus the conflict. It was something that previously had been just sort of an underpinning of a game, something that was left to the AI, but turned into its own thing and allowed to grow as that.
Right. I mean, I think part of it that's significant about SimCity is the pace. Very unique to the way you play the game, in that that's one of the innovations of the game that was so important to making it work, was the time management system, where you could increase the passage of time and slow it down while you're working. So because you're going through this cycle of laying out zones and infrastructure and basically doing all those things that a planning department of a city does, and then watching what happens. And it's fascinating to watch what happens, and that's the true evolution of the series through its iterations has been driven especially by how that animation and interaction process worked, and because that's the show, so to speak. And that's very unique. I mean, even in like StarCraft or Command and Conquer, there are very few moments where you're watching the show. I mean, if you're watching the show in a battle, you're probably going to die.
Well, yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's very different to me.
But that's
very different.
Yeah, that's what makes SimCity different. I mean, certainly there's no RPG where you're just watching things, except maybe like Final Fantasy VIII or something, where summons to play out. But let's not talk about that, because that just makes me sad.
I say labels are for food, man.
Yeah, let's not get bogged down in semantics. SimCity was its own thing. It was this crazy hippie video game where everyone had to take public transit or else your city would collapse.
Yeah,
it was all about social and not killing people.
SimCity was all about using rails instead of roads and putting all your industrial zones down in one corner.
Will Wright is a hippie. He's a beatnik.
It did definitely extol some of those virtues, right? In the whole,
for sure.
The pollution's going to overrun your city and wipe everything out, and then
these people aren't happy because of the pollution. They don't want to live here.
But then again, which city would you rather have to get around in, LA or Tokyo? One has a great rail system, one doesn't. And one has, well, they both have really nasty pollution, but...
I was about to say, I thought you were going to play. I thought that was a really weird example.
No.
We're talking about pollution, and you're like, well, I don't know.
No, the relative pollution of each city has more to do with like their physical location. One's in a valley, one's not. One's suffocatingly dense, and the other is tolerable. But no, driving in LA is awful. Getting around in Tokyo, very easy because you can just hop on a train.
Right.
So I'm down with that particular element of the philosophy behind SimCity, but
I've never had problems managing the pollution aspect. I was always thing that always gave me trouble at the end of my city's life cycle was the crime. I could just not figure out how to balance
Put police stations everywhere.
But then I'd like run out of money, and everyone would be happy because they're being taxed to death.
That's what the $1 million code is for.
Oh, I see.
You're one of those players.
So you're kind of like a combination of fascist and extreme socialist. Like you want a massive government like the government to prop you up with just tons and tons of funds,
right?
So that you can be a police state and watch over your citizens and track their every move.
Hey,
that's really interesting. I think SimCity is more like a litmus test than a video game. Personality test.
The way I always used to play SimCity, the thing I always used to find very enjoyable was to get a map with very little to no water, do the $1 million code, put the game on pause, and then build everything and basically flip the switch and watch what happens.
Watch what happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
What usually happened?
Watching is a big. I don't know if anyone had the DOS version, but I bought the add-on graphical packs, which did nothing but change the graphics. Their sole purpose was to make your cities a moon colony. It didn't do any. There was no difference in the gameplay.
I don't remember Rivers on the Moon.
Right. I mean, didn't make any sense. But the commercial zones would turn into moon commercial domes and stuff like that.
Nice.
Yeah. But they had Moon. They had Wild West. They had Asian graphics packs. And again, they didn't make any sense. They turned trains to certain type of roads, but it was basically the same thing. And
Wild West could
the
be
fun for me was watching what the little moon colonies turned into in my CGA monitor.
Wow.
So Ryan, what would happen when you just created $1 million city and hit the switch? Chaos?
Usually a ton of people would move in all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd get a bunch of... This is the Super Nintendo version. I played more the Super Nintendo version of SimCity than any other version. And you had, your little cartoony Dr. Will Wright there to advise you and give you...
He's not a real doctor, though. Kids, do not let him touch you. He's not a real doctor.
That was a little too much heartfelt there.
Sounds personal experience.
So usually, that would result in my city growing at a very quick rate.
So it would grow rather than just implode under its own stress. So you kind of had to know how to build the city, though, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's just a recipe for disaster.
I had total patterns that I would, like a ring of residential zones, and then a ring of railways, and then so on.
Did you figure them out yourself, or did you
Oh, these were things I
did you master
this was before I was on the internet?
Before the internets.
Did I?
I mean, does the game have the equivalent of Pac-Man patterns where you have to memorize certain layouts to succeed, or is it more organic than that? Like I said, I haven't really mastered SimCity.
I think there were things back in the first SimCity that you could do consistent yield very predictable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first SimCity was very much like there's mounds of strategy guides with the different block pattern layouts that you can use to build the ultimate density for different zones. Most efficient cities, all that kind of stuff.
They had ways where you could you would bulldoze like a residential area or something, but there would be one square left of the old residential area, and it would still count as a whole zone. And so you would build on top of it and basically stack residential zones to get more population density, and that's how you got to the higher city types.
So cheating, basically.
I never really did that. Just because it didn't look...
Because you have integrity, man. You have
and $1 million, you didn't need to.
I never did that because it looked ugly, and I didn't want my city to just be a bunch of little piles of semi-buildings. And so, but I know that was...
It's funny, I always fought that urge. I always fought the urge to do any of the grid stuff. I always tried to make the cities more organic, I guess, just laid out. I mean, and there's, obviously there's cities in the West that are laid out in rigid, avenues and streets on a grid.
Mm-hmm. Gunnar and I have both lived there, actually. Lubbock, Texas is a grid.
Another super flat grid. It's just not entertaining to me. It's much more interesting to try and work around, use the, especially starting with, was it 2000 where you started to be able to terraform?
I believe 2000 let you do that, yeah.
Yeah.
So you could start terraforming, and then especially in the later versions where you could drop there are people who are taking the USGS survey maps and making real maps in SimCity that you could you could import. You ever do any of that?
No, I never did.
Yeah, so if you go to some of the fan sites, so you have the ability to, there's 2 layers to it. First, there's the visual layer, and then underneath that, there's a grid that lets you establish, like, this spot is ground, this spot is water, and you lay the grid underneath anyway, you import the files into your game, and you can play, like, with whatever, and there's, like, people who've done, all the major metropolitan areas of the world, if you want to do LA, you can do LA, you want to do the Bay Area, you can do Bay Area, if you want to do Bangladesh, you could probably find Bangladesh in there. I always thought it was really fun to do those spots because then you have this real natural terrain that you have to work your city around.
See, I was the exact opposite because when I did edit my own things, they would be very designed to make it easy for me. Usually what I did is I had a block of city that was basically the pure efficiency zone, and then off in the corner would be the fun zone where you make a park that looks funny. That's about how I played that.
So Garnet basically took the natural, aesthetic, historical city route where things grow and build over time, whereas you took the Soviet artificial planning approach and just basically created Soviet blocks.
Right. And then when the people were complaining, I would make a little park and say, well, you can go play over in this park. It's 9 miles away from everything else.
I wanted to see all the crap too. It's I wanted to have a reason to use all the different bridges and tunnels and have my city laid out so that I have an airport over here. So every so often now I've got the animation of planes flying over my downtown or whatever. It's all that kind of cool stuff.
Yes.
That was it for me.
I think it's pretty significant that SimCity is one of the few games that you can think of that's been ported to just about every system ever.
God, even the DS.
It's about mobile phones. You wouldn't think mobile phones, but then again, are they really that much simpler than the Super NES was back in the day? Not really.
There's a Linux version of SimCity.
Is the mobile phone version
it's open source now, so it could basically be ported to anything you want.
SimCity is?
I believe so. It says here on Wikipedia.
Oh.
What did they know?
It must be real,
general public license. Earlier this year, as a matter of fact.
Nice.
For the original version, though.
Yes.
Yeah, so the original version to me was a great, almost a great template for building the game that SimCity became, especially, I think SimCity 4 realized, I think that one of the reasons you saw SimCity Societies even is that after SimCity 4, they're very uncertain, what to do next to make another SimCity, because especially with the fan participation, that's another thing that can't be overlooked, is this game has a community around it. Very vocal, very active folks. They've had the ability to, develop your own buildings that can be imported into the game. They did the building giveaways and so forth. If you go to Simtropolis, it's a website, simtropolis.com on the net. It's amazing the number of people you have involved there. And they, for instance, one of the things they did that was great was one of the flaws in 4 was the mass transit systems. They weren't running right. As a matter of fact, almost all their pathing because they incorporated in that whole system. You remember in 4 where you'd click on a this is in the Rush Hour add-on pack especially. You click on
I didn't play that.
Oh, you didn't play it? So they incorporated this whole idea of people and them going to work and their traffic patterns and all that kind of stuff. You click on a house and it would show you where everyone was going and what public transportation they were using, all that. And the problem was, when it first came out, I guess in order to sort of balance the load on processors at the time, it just really wasn't put together very well, where the community actually went through and tuned up and continued tuning up the pathing so that you could actually, about a year patch that you could apply that fans had done to the pathing system that made all of the mass transit systems suddenly run the way you would think they would.